A woman who is held at gunpoint by her ex-partner is facing the terrifying prospect that he'll soon be released from prison.
Gareth Wyn Jones stalked and threatened Rhianon after their relationship ended, leading her to install CCTV, which then caught the moment that he took her hostage, and he is due for release from prison in just 2 months' time. We're going to be speaking to Rhianon in a moment.
Joining us now are Rhianon and also Hetty Barkwith-Nanton, who's chair of the charity Refuge. Looking at those pictures, for us, they are kind of horrifying, but for you, they must be kind of so traumatic every time you have to relive that, and also knowing that he'll be released so soon.
It is incredibly triggering to see the pictures, and it's totally surreal to think that he will be released, given that he's just been assessed as he can't be safely managed in the community. It makes no sense whatsoever.
It's remarkable. Also, the sentence seems shockingly short. So this was a custodial term of 4.5 years, and then he's released in February. He'll be under licence restrictions for another 5 years. But this is a man who stalked you and held you, ambushed you with a weapon. I mean, what's going on? When he was sentenced, how did that make you feel?
I thought he'd be sentenced for longer.
Yeah.
I think I was still in such total shock about the whole thing. And when he ambushed me, I knew it was getting worse. I knew he'd do something, so it was a shock, but it wasn't a surprise. And I strongly feel that the sentence he was given doesn't reflect the impact on the victim. You know, here, my children and I are nearly 4.5 years later, after the sentencing, after he was arrested last. We're still in the early stages of recovery and wanting to just have the space and time to heal. And that potentially isn't going to be allowed.
It's really hard to understand, but we've actually been grappling with this for the last couple of hours, trying to understand, because, you know, the law says, his sentence says he must be released in February. That's just like a fact. But he applied for parole, as is his right, over a year ago. In November, so just last month, the Parole Board said he is not safe to be released. And the reason people go to prison is to make sure that people are safe, you and your children.
Absolutely, it's the first duty of government.
Yeah, so in November, they say he's not safe. What's going to change between November and February? Absolutely
nothing. For me, in fact, receiving the Parole Board decision letter and having it there in writing was really validating. Exactly. Because from the outset, I've said, he won't think he's done anything wrong. He won't take responsibility for his behaviour. I strongly believe he will do it again. He will not adhere to authority. It never bothered him in any way when he was being arrested in the months before.
So these licence restrictions, what's...
I have no confidence in them being adhered to, and the risk that goes with that is significant. As a family, we've already, quite frankly, suffered more than enough near-fatal errors at the hands of the criminal justice system. And I really think this is a time when there should be intervention to prevent him quite likely going on an offend again.
Rhianon, it's very anxious time for you. Stalking corrodes your sense of security because you're always on the lookout. I think sometimes when people who haven't experienced this think about it, they think it's just when he's there that you're worried. Actually, you're worried 24 hours a day. You cannot rest, you can't relax. What will you feel when he is released in February, and how will you deal with that?
I strongly suspect that all the emotion, all the reaction that went with being stalked, which I consider, although I've been told legally it isn't, was a much worse offence than being held at gunpoint. And just sort of to explain that, the pressure of the incessant stalking, and you know, you talked about when I could see him. In some ways, that's almost the easier time. It's when you can't see them and you don't know where they are and you don't know where they're going to crop up next.
I mean, I completely understand that. I think that when people don't understand it, they think you only feel the threat when you can see somebody.
There's still a lot of a lack of understanding about the impact of stalking. So for me, if I'm being really honest, it had got to the point where the pressure was so intense, it was so incessant. I'd been reporting to the police all the way through. I was being told nothing was happening, that they couldn't do anything about it. And I'd got to the point where I was considering taking my own life as a way out. And for me, you know, to have the gun at your chest and someone else making the decision that they're going to end your life isn't as bad as someone behaving to you in such a way that you consider taking your own life. And quite frankly, if that had happened, he'd have probably got away with nothing.
Hetty Barkworth-Nanton, you're patron of the Joanna Simpson Foundation, and you see a lot of cases like this. I want to ask, if this was a man who hadn't been previously in a relationship with the woman, and he'd ambushed somebody, kidnapped them, held them hostage, do you think he would have got a harsher sentence? Sometimes I wonder whether the justice system penalises people for having previously been in a relationship with the person who terrorises them in this way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question. I do just want to say massive credit to Rhianon, who's a huge survivor, and to be brave enough to sit here and share her story when it's so close to him being released. Just massive credit to you. Well done. Yes, you know, we know through the criminal justice system that in cases like this, but also in cases where women are murdered, actually where it's from a relationship, there is almost sort of less treatment, less seriousness applied to how they're treated through the system, but also then how the sentencing works. We need wholesale review of all of this.
Well, what do you think? What in an ideal world, what would happen in Rhiannon's case? Either he would be in prison for longer, or the licence conditions would say you have zero contact for the rest of your life and the rest of Rhiannon's and her family's life.
Yeah.
And the minute you do anything to breach, you go straight back in for an extended period of time. Do you think that's likely in the licence conditions?
So it is possible. I don't think for life, because unfortunately the licence conditions in your case are only for 5 years. Yeah. But certainly for those 5 years, I would urge the Secretary of State, Alex Chalk, to make sure with he and his team they apply total scrutiny to this case and ensure that he has the utmost toughest licence conditions applied. They can do that. That's within their power, that's within their gift, and they must do it.
What we can do is we can speak to the Justice Secretary, as we have done before, and say that we've had this conversation and that this is obviously a matter of great concern.
Yeah.
Under the current law, what can he do? Is it only the licence restrictions, or is there anything else which can be done to keep Rhiannon and her family safe and feeling safe? Rhiannon and I have actually been in touch for a month or so, and I've had a barrister looking at what is possible. I don't know if viewers remember, but my friend Joanna Simpson was killed, and we've been campaigning for the last year to stop her killer from being released. But in that case, there is a specific power that the Justice Secretary has been able to use. That power is not available in this case. Right. So actually, I think there is no power to stop his release, but they absolutely have the power to impose really strict licence conditions, and that's got to be the question that gets asked to him. Right, right.
Rhiannon, I mean, you know, we can see how tough this is for you, and honestly, I feel sort of frustrated, at a loss to know how to make you feel more secure. In the response to the failure to charge this man early, because you'd gone to police a number of times,
Absolutely.
a CPS spokesperson said the initial decision not to charge Gareth Wyn Jones was wrong. We've since apologised to Rhiannon. We later charged Jones, and a successful prosecution saw him behind bars, which is, of course, what he will be released from in February. North Wales Police said we thoroughly reviewed the case and understand her experiences are ones we do not want anyone else to go through. They say the force is invested in a dedicated stalking and harassment officer, and they provide domestic abuse training to all frontline officers. Presumably that's helpful. It wasn't helpful to you at the time, but to have somebody who really understands what stalking does to someone
it makes
is good
all the difference.
news.
It makes all the difference. And there's so much education that is required at all levels of the criminal justice system. Because as you've quite rightly picked up on, I strongly feel that at the moment it's still dealt with, it's still underrated as an offence, and the impact on victims, and quite often where it leads. It's something which isn't just someone hiding in the bushes watching people. Where does it lead? Where does it end up? It's often fatal. Yeah. And it's for me, it's too late. Why should the victims put up with the perpetrators being allowed to continue until they break restrictions and it's another life lost?
I agree. Yeah.
We did ask the Ministry of Justice for a spokesman before the interview, and they said the government introduced extended determinate sentences to better protect the public from dangerous offenders by making their early release dependent on the Parole Board. They still face years of strict supervision by the probation service with strict licence conditions. They'll be returned to prison if they break them. But clearly, in this case, the Parole Board said he wasn't safe to leave. Absolutely. And he's still coming out. So we will take that up with the Justice Secretary.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you
really
so much.
Appreciate it. If you've been affected by any of the issues that we have been discussing, you can get help at itv.com/helplines.